Files.
I'm 20 years old, but when this happened, I was 13 years old. It's not that long, but it's just weird. At least to me it is. All of my friends gathered at my house at around 5:30 p.m. This was on Halloween, of course. We hung out for a while playing video games and calling girls until the sun went down. Eventually we all went out to trick or treat, but we all had on masks, no costumes. We thought we were too old to wear costumes. We lived in Long Island, so there were plenty of people outside everywhere. So an hour goes by, and we stop by an apartment building at the end of a cul-de-sac that had people handing out candy in front of it. There was this one guy that seemed normal, and once we got to him, we said trick or treat. He seemed very nice, sorta. I say that because he was very charismatic when he was talking to us, but then all of a sudden, he went from laughing and grinning to just a blank face. He stopped talking to us, put the bucket of candy down, and he just went inside his building. We thought he had to poop all of a sudden and continued getting candy. As we rounded our way around the cul-de-sac, I happened to look back at the apartment building, and I saw that same man dragging what looked like a fake body out of his building, and he dropped it in the middle of the street. But the prop body didn't have a head on it. He went back inside, came back out, and the head was in his hand. I got my friend's attention and everyone turned around. The guy walked to the street, stopped at the curb, dropped the head and kicked it in the street. And he just walked away down the street like it was nothing. My friend yelled out,
"Cool props, bro."
The man stopped walking for about 2 seconds, then continued to walk. It was weird because he never looked back. He just stared at the ground. People were walking past the prop. We all walked over there, and we were amazed at how real it looked, and we continued to walk down the street. A car was pulling out of one of the driveways, but the prop was in her way. The driver got out and attempted to move the prop that was in her way. Then some kids around our age went to go help her because she was struggling. One of the boys went to pick up the body prop and immediately dropped it. At the same time, one of the other boys went to pick up the prop head and yelled out,
"What the fuck is that?"
as he simultaneously threw the head. Everyone started screaming and running. A grown-up walking with her kids went up to the head, poked it, and stepped backwards, covering her mouth with her right hand, as her eyes widened to the point where they looked like they were going to pop out. So someone called the cops. We found out that what we thought was a prop was actually real. The name of the woman was Patricia Ward, and the man we saw was her son who lived with her. His name was Derek Ward. He was found not too long after that. He was dead. He jumped in front of a moving train. Looking back on it, I'm guessing what we witnessed prior to what he did to his mother was the moment that he snapped. He literally stopped talking in mid-sentence and completely switched. He went inside and killed his mom. What if he would have used that rage on us? Honestly, I always think about that. And it scares me to this day that you can walk past anybody, never know what they're going through, and they can just snap on you. Scary, isn't it? This story gets to me every time I think about it, but I finally decided to share it with others after so many years. This was Halloween of 1981, and my 17th birthday was in a few weeks. By this time, my friends and I have stopped trick-or-treating. We would walk around the neighborhood scaring kids and just go to parties. This year, we decided to go to a party. Around 6 p.m., I left my house to meet with my friends, Maria and Gloria, to go to one of our friends' Halloween party, where all three of us lived. The party was right in the middle of us, and we would just have to meet up there at the party because that was the only smart thing to do. We lived in Brick, New Jersey, so walking alone at night as 16 and 17-year-olds, especially as girls, was pretty safe to do. About 3 minutes into my walk, I walked past plenty of trick-or-treaters. Then I headed down a back street. This may sound cliche, but as I were walking down that back street, a car slowly pulled up just ahead of me, almost like they were cutting me off. Two men were in the car, but the passenger got out smiling, but I could see the driver's face. He looked like he wanted to kill me or something. I stopped walking. The passenger then said,
Hey, we're not from around here, and we're just trying to find the address. This address. Can you help us?
As he were pointing at a piece of paper in his hand. He looked back at the driver, and the driver nodded. And he took a step toward me, smiling. Then he said,
Don't be afraid. Just help us and we'll leave.
I stepped backward, but at the same time, an older man came outside to throw away his trash. The passenger looked at him. The old man looked at the both of us, and the passenger jumped in the car. I heard him say, We'll try another one, and they drove away. The old man asked me if I was okay, and I said yes, sir. So I made it to the party and met up with Maria and Gloria. Maria was freaked out because she said that there was a car that looked like they were following her. But luckily, she was on a populated road. Gloria didn't run into those guys. So anyways, we went inside the party and had a lot of fun like usual. Close to midnight, we were all leaving. It wasn't a school night, so we got to stay out longer than usual. We all walked outside, and Gloria and I said our goodbyes, but Maria asked us to walk with her and spend the night for the night because those guys freaked her out earlier. We told her that the guys were long gone by now and it would be fine. That was the last time we saw Maria alive. So the last person to see Maria alive was this police officer from our town, and it was around midnight when he saw her. He saw her walking on a dark road by herself, so he conducted his checks, and about 10 minutes later he came back to where she was, but he didn't see her on that road anymore. She was nowhere to be found. But eventually, Maria's body was found 18 months later, behind a house, and it was the house of Sally Bienwald. Her body was cut into 3 pieces and was found along with another 17-year-old Deborah Osborne. When the suspects were shown on the news, they showed the names. It was Richard Bienwald and Darren Fitzgerald. I would never forget those faces, because those were the same men trying to get me to help them in the car. The guy Darren was the driver and Richard was the man talking to me. I look back on that night and realize how lucky I was, but I also think to myself, would that have happened to my friend if me and Gloria would have went with her? And I still feel the guilt 40 years later.
Good evening, I'm Bob Hartman for TV 34 News Brief. The Richard Bagenwall murder trial continued today in Freehold, New Jersey. Bagenwall is accused of murdering Anna Olesowitz of Camden, New Jersey, back in August of 1982. Yesterday, the jury heard testimony from Teresa Smith, Bagenwall's former live-in girlfriend. Smith's present fiancé, George Susko, took the stand after Miss Smith. What follows will be excerpts from Mr. Susko's testimony. And then you'll hear today's testimony of Detective Kevin Quinn of Ocean Township, who searched Bagenwall and Darren Fitzgerald's apartments after their arrest in Asbury Park. And then you will hear the testimony from the state's star witness, Darren Fitzgerald, who helped Bagenwall dispose of the dead girl's body.
When I was 16 years old, I never got along with my stepbrother. My stepbrother is my mother's husband's son. There was one week where we just couldn't stop arguing because he would just try bossing me around all the time. And I'd always come back at him about him still living with his parents at the age of 24. And there have been times when we would get physical with each other and our parents would have to break it up and kick him out. After kicking him out, they would always let him back in. He always had mental issues, and that's why he still lived with his parents, and he would get so mad when I would bring that up. I just didn't like the guy because he had also hit my mother before and stole her car. Anyway, the week of Halloween, which that week was on a Sunday, I decided to go to my father's house for the weekend. But I would make sure to come back on Halloween so that I can take my little brother trick-or-treating. I woke up Halloween morning very early so I can get ready for church with my father. I noticed that I didn't have a shirt, so I went to my mother's house to get a shirt. It was pretty early, around 9:30 a.m., so I knew that everyone was still asleep. But when I walked in, my stepbrother was just standing in the middle of the living room staring at me. He had an odd look on his face, as if he was smiling, but only with his mouth and not his eyes. His arms were straight down to his side. He spoke to me.
Hey, how long are you going to be gone?
I thought that was weird because the only times we speak to each other is when we're arguing. So I answered,
Just a few hours. I'll be back, but I'll be in church with my father.
He then said,
Okay, I'll see you when you get back.
Again, this was an odd interaction between us because we hated each other. His body language was off and his smile seemed different. I went to church, and when we were done, I went back to my dad's house to grab my belongings. I went home and I started playing video games. Once I got comfortable, I played for a while and I noticed that it was around 1:30 p.m. and the house was more quiet than usual. So I got up and knocked on my mother and stepfather's bedroom door. No answer. I went to my stepbrother's room, but he wasn't there. I went back to my mother's room and I opened up the door. They were still in bed. Then I looked harder and the blankets were over their heads. I immediately thought that they were pranking me because it was Halloween. I started to speak loudly just to see how their reaction would be, but there was no reaction. So I decided to pull the covers. When I did that, I saw what would be described as heinous. My mother, little brother, and stepfather were all dead. They were murdered, but my stepbrother was nowhere to be found. Now I know why he asked me how long I was going to be gone. I called the police and they found my stepbrother BJ, who was in our cabin around 100 miles away. We call him BJ, but his name is William Lister Jr. He admitted to everything. He said that when I left for church, he walked into our parents' room and shot both of them and killed my little brother with a hammer. Once I entered the bedroom, they had been dead for about 3 hours. This incident happened October 31st, 2010. He has been sentenced to life in prison, but that image will never leave my brain.